Okay, let's just jump right in. We're looking at an event. It is so fast, so decisive. It's almost hard to believe.
Right.
A single military battle, really over 2 days, that completely upends the entire political map of Europe.
Right.
We're talking about capturing an emperor, wiping out a country's main army, and literally forging a new nation.
It's not just a battle, it's a system performing with almost surgical precision. We are diving into the Battle of Sedan, fought on September 1st and 2nd, 1870.
Yeah, during the Franco-Prussian War. And our mission for you today is to get past that simple headline of Prussia won. We want to understand the exact mechanics, the logistics, the tech, the sheer administrative genius that made this happen, and how that one victory immediately paved the way for German unification. An event that, would define the next century of history.
And the outcome itself just says it all, really. In just about 48 hours, they captured Emperor Napoleon III himself.
The emperor?
The emperor, and over 100,000 French troops. This wasn't just a tactical win, it was the strategic elimination of France's main field army. It basically decided the whole war almost before it got started.
And the war itself had only begun that July.
Yeah.
July 1870.
Yeah.
The speed of this disaster for France is... well, it's what defines the entire thing. So let's start there with that initial context.
Yeah.
Because the war was pretty much decided by this mismatch in preparation, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The catalyst was, political tension. There was this whole issue with a Prussian prince being a candidate for the Spanish throne, the Ems dispatch, that led France to declare war on July 19th.
Right.
But the spark wasn't the defining factor. It was the deep systemic differences in how their militaries were run.
The sources really paint a picture of what you can only call a mobilization mismatch, a huge one.
Huge.
On the French side, you have Marshal Patrice de MacMahon. His army was disorganized, decentralized, and just suffered from a catastrophic lack of planning. They had the political will, for sure, but no logistical backbone to support it.
You hear stories of reservists who couldn't find their units that couldn't find their supplies. The maps were often wrong.
Just a total mess.
Total chaos. Now contrast that with the Prussians under General Helmuth von Moltke, the Elder.
The architect.
He was the Prussian chief of the general staff. And this is where you see the genius. Moltke had spent years, literally years, meticulously planning out railway timetables for every possible war scenario.
So you're saying Sedan wasn't really won on the battlefield on September 1st? It was won weeks earlier by Moltke's, paperwork, his administrative skill?
That's a huge part of it, yes. While French soldiers are wandering around waiting for a train, Moltke is using the German rail system to move hundreds of thousands of troops to the border with unprecedented speed and precision.
And that logistical superiority translates directly to just raw numbers on the ground.
Exactly.
The numbers game was just crushing.
Yeah.
So when Moltke's forces finally converged near Sedan, the Prussian army and his German allies had, what was it?
Well over 200,000 troops.
200,000?
And the French, meanwhile, were struggling to pull together about 120,000.
Wow.
That 80,000-man gap, that's almost an entire army in itself. They were outnumbered and already being surrounded by an enemy who got there faster and was way better coordinated.
So that numerical advantage sets the stage. But the thing that turns a possible siege into a swift, a devastating rout, that was technology. Let's dig into that, because this is where the Prussian edge just became brutal.
Okay, so if there's one technical detail you need to remember, it's the Krupp artillery.
The Krupp guns.
Yeah. The French army was still using bronze, muzzle-loading field guns. The Prussians had already switched to steel, breech-loading cannons made by Krupp.
Okay, that sounds technical, but break that down. What does that actually mean for the soldiers on the field?
It meant everything. The French bronze guns were, kind of fragile, and you had to reload them from the front, which was slow and exposed the crew. The Prussian Krupp guns, made of this superior steel, were way more durable, and crucially, being breech loaders, you could load them from the back. This massively increased the rate of fire and let the gunners stay under cover.
So it's not just a better gun, it's a faster and safer gun. You've got a disparity in both quantity and quality of artillery.
Precisely. They could shell French positions faster, harder, and from a safer distance. Their range was superior, so they could often hit the French when the French couldn't even fire back effectively.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading that the French infantry rifle, the Chassepelle, was actually considered better than the Prussian Needle gun. Better range, more accurate. Why didn't that matter?
That's a fantastic question because it gets to the heart of it.
Right.
The Chassepelle was a superior rifle. It gave French infantry a real tactical advantage in close fights. But the problem wasn't tactical, it was operational. In the 1870s, massed artillery fire was the real killer. If the Krupp guns can just shatter your formations before your infantry even gets close enough to use their better rifles, well, the rifle's superiority becomes irrelevant.
So artillery dominance just trumps everything else.
It's the perfect example of it.
Okay, so Moltke brings the numbers, he brings the tech. The final piece of this whole puzzle was the geography, the brutal strategic trap.
The objective was simple: complete encirclement. The French army, under MacMahon, was trying to relieve another French force trapped at Metz. But they were outmaneuvered and basically herded into the fortified town of Sedan.
And the geography there is key, isn't it? Why was Sedan such a perfect trap?
The town is nestled in this natural basin, sort of a bowl, created by a bend in the Meuse River. So Moltke just had to make sure his forces controlled the heights surrounding the town and sealed the roads.
And the river blocks their escape to the south.
Exactly. Once the Prussians took the high ground, especially the Calvaire Heights, they had perfect sight lines for their Krupp guns to fire down into the French positions. The French weren't just trapped, they were trapped in a shooting gallery.
So when the fighting starts on September 1st, the desperation must have been immediate.
It was. The French knew they were cornered. The sources describe these frantic, almost suicidal breakout attempts.
Like the cavalry charges.
Yes, the famous charge of the French cavalry at Floenkern. But these efforts were just pulverized. Any movement in the open was met with this devastating, concentrated artillery fire from the hills.
And then the French command structure starts to fall apart.
It crumbles. Marshal MacMahon himself gets severely wounded early on, which just throws the French side into more confusion.
And this brings us to the really personal, tragic part of the story. Emperor Napoleon III, the head of state, is right there on the battlefield.
He's there. He's riding around. And by some accounts, he was actually seeking death.
Yeah.
He'd rather be killed in battle than face the humiliation of surrender.
I mean, can you imagine?
And he's in agony. He's suffering from bladder stones, chronic pain. But he stays there, watching his army, his empire being systematically destroyed right in front of him.
He's watching his army turn into a defeated mob. For an emperor who is also the commander-in-chief, that must have been just unbearable.
It was the ultimate turning point. And it wasn't a military decision in the end, it was a personal one. The sources say that by around 4 p.m., he realized it was futile. He wanted to stop the bloodshed.
Right.
So Napoleon III himself orders a white flag to be raised.
So he takes the surrender on himself as emperor to save his men.
He did. And the full formal capitulation of the entire army followed the next morning, September 2nd. He personally met with Bismarck and Moltke.
That moment, the surrender of an emperor and his army, it's the definitive moment. But the cost, the numbers, they're just staggering.
They really are.
Let's just pause on these figures because they show the sheer efficiency of this Prussian victory. For the French, what were the losses?
For the French, it was a catastrophe. Roughly 3,000 killed, maybe 14,000 wounded in the battle itself.
Okay, but that's not the big number.
No. The number that seals the war is the number of prisoners. A massive 104,000 French soldiers were captured, along with their emperor.
104,000.
Yeah.
That's their entire army in the field.
It's about 85% of their fighting force in the region. There was just no way to continue the war effectively after that.
And the Prussian casualties, in contrast.
Totaled about 9,000 killed or wounded. A significant loss, of course, but a fraction of the damage they inflicted. It just shows how overwhelmingly successful their strategy was.
And that success had these immediate, just explosive political consequences. The triple aftershock, as our sources call it.
Instantly rearranged the power dynamics of Europe.
Consequence number one. The defeat triggers the immediate fall of the Second French Empire.
Right. The Second Empire was already a bit shaky, facing domestic opposition. The emperor's capture was the final nail in the coffin. As soon as the news hit Paris, there were uprisings. The regime was gone because the emperor was gone.
And that vacuum is filled almost instantly. Consequence number two. Revolutionaries in Paris declare the Third French Republic.
It's an unbelievably swift transition. A monarchy collapses and a republic rises, all because of a single battle hundreds of miles away.
And that republic would last for 70 years.
Yeah.
But the third consequence, this is the one that really changed the world.
It is. The victory at Sedan paved the way directly for German unification.
How did it do that? What was the final piece Moltke and Bismarck needed?
They needed a huge, dramatic, undeniable victory over a major European power. They needed it to convince the southern German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, the ones who were hesitant.
To prove that Prussia was the real deal.
Exactly. Sedan delivered that proof. It validated the power and efficiency of the Prussian military system, and it created this huge wave of popular support for a united Germany.
And within 4 months, it was official. The German Empire is proclaimed in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles.
Right outside Paris, the ultimate symbol that a new continental power had been born directly from France's defeat.
So to synthesize all this, you can basically draw a straight line from Napoleon III raising that white flag to the birth of modern Germany.
You can. The swift mobilization, the logistical superiority of the railways, and that absolutely critical tech advantage from the Krupp artillery, it all led to one of history's most strategically efficient victories.
And we've seen how capturing 104,000 men and an emperor didn't just end a war, it ended one empire and created a rival one.
Yeah.
Almost overnight. It just fundamentally changed the map.
The military decision created an immediate political revolution.
So here's something for you to think about, connecting that tactical reality to the political one. What other moments in military history have so quickly, so completely reshaped the political map with that kind of speed? The surrender at Sedan didn't just end an empire, it built a new one. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the fragile line between military preparedness and, well, instant political collapse.
Today, we're opening up a deep dive into an event that is just a perfect historical inflection point. The Battle of Sedan in September 1870. This wasn't just, a military victory. It was the geopolitical earthquake that shattered an empire and built a new one.
That's absolutely right. For you, the listener, the key takeaway from our sources is really clear. Sedan is where two massive historical processes just slam into each other.
Right.
It completely cripples France. It removes its ability to resist, and at the same time, it hands Otto von Bismarck the ultimate bargaining chip for German unification.
And the whole map of Europe changes in, 4 months, all starting here.
It's an incredible timeline.
And the single fact that just immediately shows you the magnitude of what happened is the sheer scale of the French defeat. It wasn't just a lost battle.
No, not at all.
It was the total removal of an army and the capture of a reigning monarch at the same time. The French Emperor, Napoleon III, he surrenders with over 100,000 troops.
That level of comprehensive, immediate catastrophe is so rare in modern history.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the details of the military trap itself.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So the military catastrophe, it unfolds across September 1st and 2nd, 1870, right up near the Belgian border. When you look at the details, it's clear the French command was just strategically cornered.
Completely. Pinned against the fortress city of Sedan and the Meuse River. The Prussian and Allied German forces didn't just defeat them. They achieved a near-perfect encirclement. The geography itself turned into a kill box for the French.
A kill box, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, just imagine being hemmed in. You've got the river on one side, the Belgian frontier on the other, which you can't cross, and superior Prussian artillery just raining down from the heights all around you.
So there's nowhere to go.
Nowhere. Our sources say the French suffered around 3,000 killed and 14,000 wounded. But honestly, those numbers, while tragic, they kind of missed the bigger point.
Which is the surrender.
It's the massive surrender that follows. That's the critical fact.
Because that surrender meant the core operational field army of France, the one force capable of actually defending Paris, it just ceased to exist.
It's gone. You can replace casualties, sure, but you can't immediately replace an entire army structure.
Especially one that's just lost its commander-in-chief on the battlefield.
Precisely. And that's why the capture of Napoleon III elevates this from just a major battle into a history-altering event. It's the symbolic knockout blow.
So losing the army is devastating.
But losing the head of state, who is personally leading his troops, at the same time, it means the political and military command structure of the entire nation is just decapitated. Instantly.
And when you combine the defeat at Sedan with the fact that France's other main army, the Army of the Rhine, was already bottled up at Metz.
And capitulated shortly after, right?
It meant France had virtually no standing military left to challenge the Prussians. Strategically, the war was won right there.
It was an unrecoverable strategic collapse. With no field army between the German forces and the capital, the path to Paris was just wide open.
And the sources show the Prussian general staff knew this. They pivoted immediately.
They did. Their primary military objective was achieved. Now the goal was political.
And that political shockwave, it didn't stop at the border. This is where it gets really interesting, how the military failure instantly triggers a political revolution in France.
The timeline is just It's breathtakingly fast.
So the news of the emperor's capture reaches Paris.
And it creates this immediate visceral reaction. The Second French Empire, which had stood for nearly 2 decades, dissolves in a matter of hours. On September 4th, that's just 2 days after the main fighting at Sedan concluded, the people of Paris rise up. Politicians seize the moment, and bam, the Third Republic is declared.
2 days. One day you have an emperor ruling France. 2 days later, he's a prisoner of war, and the state he built is just gone.
And this collapse is so vital for understanding what happens next. This rapid downfall meant the new Republican government. Well, it was cobbled together under immense duress.
They had no time to organize.
None. No time to build a new army, consolidate control, or even get international legitimacy before the German siege lines were drawn around Paris in late September.
So Sedan didn't just destroy the army. It made sure the successor government was born in total crisis, literally under bombardment.
Exactly. It prevented any organized French resistance beyond, desperate localized efforts. The siege of Paris itself becomes a symbol of this political vacuum.
Okay, so while France is imploding, we have to shift our focus to the winner side, because Bismarck is now facing arguably a greater challenge than defeating the French army.
I think so, yeah.
He has to pivot from this foreign victory to overcoming all this internal resistance to German unity. This is the real deep dive here. How does he use Sedan to forge an empire?
This is where Bismarck's political genius really shines. Before Sedan, the push for a Prussian-led unified Germany faced deep resistance.
From the southern states, right?
Yes. The North German Confederation, which Prussia already dominated, that was one thing. But convincing the large, independent southern German states to join was another matter entirely.
And we're talking primarily about Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden. What was their main hang-up? Why were they so resistant?
Well, there were a few reasons. First, they were afraid of losing their own autonomy. Bavaria, for instance, had its own powerful monarchy, its own army, even its own postal service.
Okay.
Second, there's a huge religious divide. Prussia was predominantly Protestant. Bavaria was overwhelmingly Catholic. They saw this union as submitting to a Protestant Prussian power.
So a shared German identity wasn't enough to overcome these political, economic, and religious divides?
Not on its own, no. It sounds like an internal mess that one battle shouldn't have been able to solve.
It sounds too neat.
Right. But Sedan was the crucial ingredient because it provided immediate, undeniable leverage. The victory automatically triggered the defense and alliance treaties that these southern states had signed with Prussia.
So the war itself legally forced them onto the battlefield together.
Precisely. And fighting together, winning together, crushing the traditional enemy, France, that created this powerful shared narrative of success. But Bismarck knew that was fleeting.
The momentum could fade.
Exactly. He had to solidify the political foundation immediately. And this is where he got into the real political horse trading.
It sounds like he had to do more than just rely on patriotic enthusiasm.
Oh, absolutely. The sources show the details of the November treaties of 1870, the documents that formally brought the southern states in. Bismarck knew he couldn't just centralize everything. He had to offer real concessions.
So what were some of those concessions? What did he give, say, Bavaria to convince them to sacrifice their independence?
They were very specific, designed to protect Bavarian pride. Bavaria was allowed to keep its own army in peacetime, its own railway administration, and its own postal and telegraph services.
Right.
And crucially, they were allowed to keep certain privileges regarding taxes, specifically the beer tax.
The famous beer tax.
The beer tax. It was economically significant, sure, but it was also incredibly important culturally for Bavaria.
So Bismarck basically traded some federal structures and local fiscal control for national unity. He showed them unification didn't mean being erased by Prussia.
Exactly. He proved it would be a federal alliance. He'd achieved the lesser German solution unification without Austria and used the momentum of Sedan to make the reluctant states feel like they were entering the Union as partners, as victors, not as subjects.
That's the ultimate proof of converting military success into political reality. The battle is in early September, and he has the treaty signed by November. That speed is incredible.
That speed prevented any second thoughts. Had the war dragged on or had the victory been less decisive, those southern states might have retreated back in their shell of neutrality. Sedan was the inescapable proof that their future lay with Prussia.
Which leads us directly into the symbolic final act. While these deals are being done, Prussian forces kept their stranglehold on Paris, leading to the city's surrender in January 1871.
And that surrender enabled the ultimate act of political theater. The German Empire was formally proclaimed on January 18th, 1871.
But the location is everything.
It is. They chose the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles.
The very center of French royal power.
Yes. The monument to Louis XIV's absolute monarchy and decades of French dominance over Europe. To proclaim a new German empire there, while Paris was starving under siege, it wasn't just a symbol of victory.
It was a deliberate humiliation.
A profound political and psychological humiliation of the entire French nation. It sent a message. The balance of power has permanently shifted.
At that moment, King Wilhelm I becomes Kaiser Wilhelm I, and the Second German Reich is born.
And the final formalities came with the Treaty of Frankfurt in May 1871. The French had to accept a massive indemnity payment, but the most enduring and toxic consequence was the territorial loss. Alsace-Lorraine, a region rich in resources, culturally significant. And it immediately became the defining source of antagonism between the two nations for the next 40 years.
It basically set the stage for the conflicts of the 20th century.
It absolutely did. And on the German side, how did they see this? They saw it as their absolute foundational moment.
They created a national holiday, right?
They did. They marked the battle's anniversary as Sedan Day and celebrated it nationally until the end of World War I. This wasn't just a military parade. It was a celebration of the nation's very creation.
So what does this all mean? We've traced this stunningly compressed historical timeline from the Battle of Sedan on September 1st, 1870,
which destroys the French army and government,
straight through this period of relentless political manipulation by Bismarck, leading to a new empire being proclaimed just 4 months later.
The core insight here, I think, is that great leaders understand that military success is temporary if it isn't immediately converted into political power. Sedan wasn't a standalone victory.
It was a mechanism.
It was the mechanism that allowed Bismarck to fulfill his lifetime ambition. He leveraged fear, pride, and even, specific tax breaks to create a unified state that changed centuries of history in just a few months.
And so the unified Germany, born in the ultimate symbol of French humiliation, the Hall of Mirrors, and built on the memory of Sedan. I think you have to consider the historical weight this new nation carried. Its very foundation was predicated on crushing a neighbor, seizing territory, and then celebrating that moment every single year. How did this violently symbolic birth shape the new nation's core identity and its foreign policy, ensuring the next 50 years would be defined by this one victory? That's the profound legacy of Sedan.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a single moment where a battlefield defeat just vaporizes an empire.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't just lose a war, it erases a government and completely reshapes the map of Europe. We're diving into the capture of Napoleon III at the Battle of Sedan, September 2nd, 1870.
That date is such a critical flashpoint. And for you, the listener, if you really want to understand how major turning points work, this is almost a perfect case study of total systemic failure.
And our sources give us this incredible three-dimensional view, don't they?
They do. We've got the military strategy, the complete breakdown in leadership, and maybe the most fascinating part, the personal story of the emperor himself.
So our mission today is to unpack not just the final surrender, but the strategic blunders that led them into this trap, the sheer chaos in command during the fight, and then the political earthquake that hit Paris the moment the news arrived.
It's a story about how one sick man's failure brought a whole empire crashing down. So let's start with that sick man, Napoleon III.
Yeah.
Because this is the detail that I think changes the whole narrative from a purely military one to something deeply human.
It's so often glossed over, but it's absolutely central. Our sources are clear. Napoleon III is personally leading the French army of Chalon, but he's suffering badly from kidney stones.
And we're not talking about, a minor ache. This is chronic, debilitating pain.
To the point where he's often in a carriage behind the lines, not on horseback with his commanders. That physical distance alone is a huge problem.
A huge problem. And that personal burden has these massive strategic consequences. The French objective was already pretty desperate.
Right. They weren't exactly operating from a position of strength.
Not at all. They have one army, the Army of the Rhine, already trapped at Metz. So the Army of Chalon with the Emperor is trying this, almost suicidal relief mission.
They're marching northeast, trying to swing around the Prussians and break the siege at Metz.
A high-risk gamble that needed everything to go right. And when you're facing the Prussians of 1870, that's just not going to happen.
So let's talk about the Prussian side of this. Their strategy was engineered by Helmuth von Moltke.
Yes, and his approach was just fundamentally different. It was modern, it was flexible. The Prussian general staff system is the real genius here.
So it's not all top-down command like the French.
Exactly. Moltke sets the broad vision, but his core commanders are highly trained and empowered to act on their own initiative. So while the French are making this one desperate linear charge,
What was Moltke's counter?
it's brilliant and incredibly fast. He uses their superior railways, their logistics to move the Third and Fourth Armies. They don't just block the French relief mission.
No.
They swing around them and drive the entire French army into the valley of the Meuse River, right up against the fortress of Sedan.
And that's where the geography becomes the jaws of the trap.
Yeah.
You look at a map of Sedan and you just see it instantly. It's a bottleneck.
They have nowhere to run. They're pinned. You have the fortress and the river at their back, the Belgian border to the north, which they can't cross, and the Prussians closing in from all other sides.
It's a cauldron.
It is a perfect cauldron. And the hills, the heights around Sedan, gave Moltke the perfect stage for what was about to happen.
Okay, so the strategic trap is sprung. And this is the moment where everything just starts to unravel for the French on a tactical and, well, a human level.
The command chaos is almost as big a factor as the Prussian strategy.
It starts at the very top, right?
Right at the top. The day begins, the fighting gets serious, and almost immediately, Marshal MacMahon, the senior commander, is wounded and taken out of action.
And in that moment, you need a seamless transfer of command.
Which is the one thing they did not have.
So what happened?
Well, MacMahon wanted to pass command to General Ducrot. Ducrot takes one look at the situation and realizes their only hope is to break out, to retreat immediately.
A sensible decision, it sounds like.
A desperate but logical one. But before he can even get the orders out properly, General de Wimpfen shows up.
He disputes the command.
He claims he has a sealed letter from the war minister in Paris giving him seniority if MacMahon is incapacitated.
You're kidding. So in the middle of this catastrophic battle, two generals are arguing over who's in charge.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? And the result is paralysis, then disaster. Wimpfen immediately cancels Ducrot's retreat order.
What was his plan?
Frontal assaults. He thinks they can still punch their way out. So you have the army swinging from retreat orders to attack orders. It's just chaos. Total, uncoordinated chaos.
And while all this internal French drama is unfolding, the Prussians are what? They're just tightening the noose.
Systematically. And this is where their key tactical advantage comes into play. The artillery.
Right. The famous Krupp steel guns.
The guns were superior, yes, but the key was the geography. They had dragged them up onto the heights surrounding the valley.
So they can just rain fire down on the French army who are all packed together below.
Exactly. By late afternoon on September 1st, it's not even a battle anymore. It's a slaughter. A relentless, focused bombardment causing horrific casualties.
You can only imagine the desperation. You're trapped, surrounded, and this fire is just coming from everywhere.
And that's the moment the emperor himself steps in. He sees the carnage. He knows Wimpfen's last-ditch attacks are just pointless bloodshed.
So he makes a personal decision.
A personal and, you could say, a humanitarian one. He overrules his generals. He says, enough. And he orders a white flag to be raised from the walls of Sedan to stop the killing.
And that brings us to the next morning, September 2nd, and to a detail that, for me, is just the most striking human part of this whole story.
It's incredible.
The emperor's preparing to meet his conquerors, Bismarck and the Prussian king. And he's still in agony from his illness.
That physical pain, the thing that's been undermining him this whole time, is still there at the moment of his ultimate humiliation. And our sources tell us this amazing detail.
He rouged his cheeks.
He used makeup to hide how pale and sick he was, to try and project some tiny facade of imperial dignity as he's about to surrender his entire regime.
That one small act, it says everything. So he gets in his carriage and goes to meet King William and Bismarck to formally surrender.
And we have to just pause on the sheer scale of this surrender. It's almost biblical.
It's not just him.
No. He surrenders himself, the head of state, and his entire army. Over 100,000 soldiers captured. 558 cannons.
The Second Empire's main field army is just gone. Wiped out in a day.
An unprecedented military disaster.
So you'd think the Prussians would be ecstatic. Parades, celebrations. But that's not what happened, is it?
No, the reaction from the victors was much more complicated. They were genuinely shocked that they'd actually captured the emperor.
Wait, so they weren't happy. Why not?
Because it created a massive political problem. They wanted to win the war, but they also wanted a quick peace treaty.
And you can't sign a treaty with a government whose leader you're holding prisoner.
Precisely. By capturing Napoleon III, they had decapitated the French state, they knew instantly that they had created a power vacuum back in Paris and that things were about to get very complicated.
That vacuum was filled almost immediately. The news hits the wire.
The Telegraph carries it to Paris by September 4th, just 2 days later. And the city, which was already simmering with discontent, just explodes.
We have to remember the Second Empire was never truly stable, was it? It was all built on the personal authority of Napoleon III.
Exactly. The whole system was only as strong as the emperor's legitimacy. And the second that legitimacy vanished, when he became a prisoner of the Prussians, the whole house of cards just collapsed.
Our sources call the revolution in Paris bloodless.
It was. There was no need for a big fight. The regime just ceased to exist. It crumbled under the weight of its own failure.
And in its place rises the Third Republic. But here's the twist. This new government isn't suing for peace.
Far from it. This new government of national defense refuses to surrender any French territory. So the war, which should have ended at Sedan, is transformed. It becomes a national struggle, a people's war that forces the Prussians into a long, brutal siege of Paris.
And the man at the center of it all, the deposed emperor.
His story ends quietly, in exile. He's imprisoned in a German castle, Wilhelmshohe, and eventually released to live out his days in England. But the damage was done. Sedan was the turning point, not just for the war, but for the next century of European politics.
So let's bring this all together for you, the listener. What we're seeing at Sedan is this perfect storm. You have Moltke's brilliant strategic trap, yes.
But that trap only worked because of the deep internal failures of the French.
Right. It starts with the emperor's debilitating illness, which leads to a lack of clear direction, which then explodes into that catastrophic command chaos on the battlefield.
All those pieces had to be in place to create a defeat a defeat so absolute it didn't just end a battle, it ended an entire political regime.
Indeed. We've seen the scale of the failure. But for a final provocative thought, let's go back to that one detail. The emperor rouging his cheeks.
That desperate attempt to hide his personal, physical reality.
Exactly. His hidden physical frailty influenced his command, his decisions, and ultimately his fate. So the question for you to think about is this. How often in history does a leader's personal health, their private struggles, something completely hidden from public view, how often does that become the real unseen engine of massive political and historical change? That link between the personal and the political is something worth thinking about.